now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Thank you all. It is a pleasure to greet you on a Monday as the United States of America is rapidly dismantled and the economic system which carries the world is completely reimagined in a grotesque, horrible way, everyone. It's a great, yes. There are no people I'd rather go down with than my audience on this show. Thank you. Yes. We will talk a lot about what's happening. There was just a huge meeting in the White House, as you know, with the president of El Salvador. And boy, this guy, he knows how to play Trump. He was a ninja with Trump, I thought. I mean, and it's sadly, you know, it doesn't uphold the ideals that you hope would be upheld. But in terms of playing Trump, this guy really does get him. We'll talk a little bit about that. Gary Dietrich is coming through as well. It is the finals of Marx Madness, and we will see these two drops face off against each other in just a moment. We'll get that going. And I have to say that Kim has sort of a... It's weird because she doesn't really she doesn't benefit at all if she were to win, but this drop that she has, it does have her voice on it. She could, she might have a bounce in her step. I mean, she clearly would like.
I blame you.
She'd like to see that win, I'm sure.
I don't think I voted for that, though.
Yeah.
I think I voted for Girl Baby Girl.
Oh, well, there you go. I mean, who can, that's part of the madness of Marx Madness. Who can really tell what allegiances anyone has?
Right.
You know? It's a reflection, in a sense, of modern America.
Now,
but
Marx Madness.
The commissioner of Marx Madness has joined us for the announcement of the finals, and also some interesting correspondences that we got from you. And here he is, Albert, everybody. Yeah. Albert, and you in your commissioner role, you must have been following the brackets pretty closely throughout this entire tournament. I wonder if you can comment on the current state of things, please, Commish.
Yeah, currently, if Tony can share what the standings are looking like. Yes, so if you could look closely here, let me blow it up just a little bit for everyone.
Jane leads. Jane Oros. Then Cranky.
Jane Oros with a couple familiar names there. Daniel Martin, Cranky Charcoal, which is a great name, and we haven't seen this name the whole time. Just with the advancement of the drops to the finals has skyrocketed to the top, and you can see towards the bottom here of this page.
Oh, I see. Mark Thompson.
Mark Thompson and Michael Snyder.
Just below George, Vanessa has done well. George has done well, but then there is me. And I'm just ahead of Michael Snyder, where I like to be. A little bit ahead of Michael Snyder, the Culture Blaster.
Yeah, and over the weekend we had a couple of our experts, a couple amateur Steve Kornackis, if I could say, email in to tell you your chances of winnings are pretty high, and it just depends on what would win. So Daniel Martin did, who's over here in the top 3, did email in that you'll be number 1 if AOC Baby Girl wins the whole tournament.
Yeah. Hi, Mark. I recalculated, and it appears that if AOC Baby Girl wins the tournament, you will be number 1 in scoring, which is an amazing.
What?
I know.
Girl, baby girl. Don't even play.
Michael Snyder will be tied for 2nd place with 2 other players. Then there will be a 5-way tie for 3rd place. Again, this is from Daniel Martin, who looked closely at the brackets. If I Blame You wins, he says Jane Oros will be number 1, Cranky Charcoal will be number 2, and there will be a 3-way tie for 3rd place. Of course, I will be pulling, he says, for I Blame You to win. But it would be unprecedented for Mark Thompson to win Marx Madness. It is true. Some would say there's never been anything like it.
There's never been anything like this.
Yeah. See you Monday morning, Daniel Martin. Thank you, Daniel, for that breakdown. That was really quite good. And what I end up realizing, Albert, is that I have a lot of personal stake in the outcome, which makes me very uncomfortable.
Yeah, and it gets you back into it. I think I'm not to say that you're checked out a little bit, but it's not something to look forward to when you're not as high on the league.
Yeah, no, I think you can say it. Yeah, I think you're right. All of a sudden, I have a real interest. So, all right. So now it'll be these two and the voting, just to get this ahead of before we actually drop it. The voting goes on until midnight tonight Pacific time, 3 a.m. Eastern, right?
That's correct. And then with the outcome of this, it'll be our crowned champion. That'll be tomorrow that we will announce that.
I will come on. I'm actually not going to be here for the whole show tomorrow, but I will come on at the very beginning. That's not something that really matters to anybody in the audience. But, my point is, it's that special. Albert will be here. I'll be here. Kim, Tony. It really will be all hands on deck for tomorrow's finals, but we have to get some voting done before we get to the finals. That's right. It is March Madness, the crescendo, the denouement, the big finish. You'll vote for either...
I blame you.
Or...
Oh, girl, baby girl. Don't even play.
Again, you'll vote for...
I blame you.
Or...
Oh, girl, baby girl. Don't even play.
Vote in the post section of our YouTube channel until 3 a.m. Eastern, midnight tonight on the West Coast. Yeah, we're very excited. Albert, again, anything could happen. We've seen drops go out to a lead in voting early, and then they get crushed in later voting. It's not unlike American elections, is it, Albert?
Not at all. And it's just, this is probably the most unpredictable final I feel like we've had, because you just don't know. This has been so 50-50, and I think we've just been talking about these two drops the whole time. So
yeah, it's true. They're popular. And again, this doesn't mean that you're voting a drop off the show. It just is a question of what wins March Madness. That's all. So, only one drop can win. Just like last year, both drops in the finals are ones I sent in, so I win either way, says Trevor Starr in Hollywood. Trevor Starr in Hollywood with a $10.10 super chat is right. Oftentimes we'll ask him for drops of one sort or another, and he always steps up, so thank you. All right, Albert, I want to thank you for taking a minute to jump in. Keep us posted, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.
We'll be back to see who wins. Thank you.
Okay, sir. It's Albert, the commissioner of March Madness, taking time out to fill in the assembled on the situation. So,
the Mark Thompson Show.
Yes, I'll get to Bill Maher. I see you asking about Bill Maher in the chat. We'll get to that. And Mark's going to win his own golf tournament, John Watson says. Yeah, it's very Trumpian. Yeah, very Trumpian. Although you can see everything, I got the votes in pretty early. Pretty weird that it's kind of a wild finish, kind of a wild finish here. So, as I say, I'll get to the Bill Maher thing. I will. I have some strong thoughts on it, and I'd really happily share them with you. I just want to get to it a little bit later, probably an hour or two. We've got Gary Dietrich coming up bottom of this hour. I do want to recognize and try to find something that's not pure Trumpian or, at the beginning of the show, just to warm us up. We did March Madness a second ago. And I also note that the Women in Space crew came back down to Earth. They took off and came back down in their tight blue space suits.
Spandex this time they went for.
Well, I mean, Kim, I'm sure, chose it themselves. I doubt they succumbed to the patriarchy when it came to choosing their outfits. But Amazon CEO sending his fiance into space with the all-women crew in their chic outfits. This time it's tight blue outfits. Next time it'll be mini skirts.
And high heels.
Well, in Star Trek, they used to wear mini skirts, all the women. So it might be in the future. Yeah, way in the future.
The old Star Trek. I'm thinking of 7 of 9 Star Trek.
Well, you can say old. I call it the original Star Trek. Yes, thank you very much. All right, now look at them coming off of the
Katy Perry kissing the ground.
Katy Perry coming off the Blue Origin spacecraft. There it was. Yeah.
Why does the spaceship look like a male member? If you
Well,
know what I'm saying.
yeah, I don't really know what you're saying. I would love for you to be more specific, but I think
No, you don't really.
I think I don't know why they chose. Maybe that was the most aerodynamically friendly.
It's a little
choice.
strange. So
Yeah,
they're
I do
going
agree.
up in this
kind of
phallic-shaped rocket ship,
it's
and
conspicuous. I agree.
in
I
their
agree.
spandex. Yeah. It's
Well,
a very sexy trip they took.
yeah, there was you're right. There's a lot of sex appeal there. I never had thought of that.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. Kim is not wrong. So anyway, welcome back, Blue Origin. They really turned it into a thing. They had, interviews, and I mean, I understand why, but it was really quite, quite interesting to see them all come off the spacecraft and talk about it. Anyway, not the only thing going on, but that's not related to Trump. I have one other weird item. I'll share it with you now, and then we'll get going on Trump, on tariffs, on the deportation of citizens by mistake, and then allowing the deportation just to sit. I'll get to all of that. The other thing I want to mention to you, though, was
The Mark Thompson Show.
Rosie O'Donnell, who is a lesbian, isn't she? She's
she's
unapologetic. Yeah, she's
She's been married to a woman and has a lot of
Thank you.
children. I mean, I think you could change your mind. Maybe is that what's going on?
Oh, well, she is now apparently saying that she's struck up a surprising, as she calls it, friendship with the convicted murderer, Lyle Menendez. He was convicted, of course, with his brother of first-degree murder in 1989. They were shot in 1989. The conviction, I think, followed by 18 months or something like that. She had expressed her belief that the brothers' actions were a result of self-defense in an interview on Larry King's show. So she's already on record as saying, hey, I think these guys sort of did it in self-defense.
What can you tell us about the scene?
She thinks it's self-defense, Larry. It's not self-defense. I mean, you don't shoot two people sitting on the couch as they watch television. You don't slaughter them and then tell me it's in self-defense. Now, there might be other explanations. One of the explanations entered into this entire thing in court, as you know, is a result of abuse. It was the physical and mental abuse that took place over years, but that's not self-defense. You may say it's justifiable homicide or it explains it or whatever, but I mean, I don't know. I don't think there's any excuse that washes here, but obviously Rosie and I disagree. In any case, she recalls on Larry King Live, where she had expressed that belief that the actions were a result of self-defense, that led her to develop this friendship with Lyle Menendez. And he and his brother sit there all these years, and now the idea somehow is that Rosie has become, what would you say? Is she attracted to him? Or she said, she's kind of said in a People magazine interview, he's the one straight man who I could see, getting together with. Isn't that what she said?
She said he's the one straight man that I trust, basically, that I can trust and that I can trust with my vulnerabilities, emotions, that type of thing.
No.
Mhm.
Wow.
I wonder how they even got connected. I mean, how do you become friends with someone who's in prison for life? Are you one of those people who starts writing letters, or should she interview him?
Well, apparently she did an interview, and it lasted multiple hours. And then he started calling me, this is a quote, on a regular basis from the tablet phone thing that they have. Quote, he would tell me about his life, what he's been doing in prison. For the first time in my life, I felt safe enough to trust and be vulnerable and love a straight man. O'Donnell proceeded to stay in touch with Menendez and visited him in prison. Following a 1993 mistrial, the Menendez brothers were then convicted in 96 and sentenced to life in prison without parole. They since fought to be released from prison, saying that they murdered their parents out of fear for their lives.
She's gone off the deep end. I agree with Kathleen Bryant here, who says Rosie is totally losing it.
Yeah.
Come on.
She has moved to Ireland, though. That's something that maybe others of you are considering. Rosie has moved to Ireland with her 12-year-old child, Clay, who is autistic. And she's done that, she says, because of Donald Trump's presidency. So, anyway, that's the update on Rosie O'Donnell in love and living in Ireland. That is the summary. Good times.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It has been a busy day at the White House. The president entertaining the president of El Salvador, wannabe dictator meets already dictator.
That's fun.
And there was a pretty, it was a riff fest, meaning that Trump sort of just spoke at length. And he would just sort of flitter from one thing to the next, you know. It was interesting because he started on this question of who's being held in the Salvadoran prison. And then before you know it, he's on to Joe Biden messed up the Afghanistan withdrawal. Joe Biden messed up the economy. That's not going to happen anymore. We've been ripped off for 40 years. He kind of just moved from one thing to the next. It was I guess that's classic Trump on one level, but it was also quite bizarre to see him kind of play the hits in front of Bukele, who actually played Trump perfectly. He wasn't inordinately ingratiating. The stuff I saw was just, you know, the stuff you see from his cabinet officials and the people who are around Trump is so cartoonishly ingratiating that you would go, dude, you just take it down a little bit. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's the, you know, I'm so grateful that I've had an opportunity to reimagine America in the courageous vision of our president, Donald Trump. And I can't imagine any president in our history being able to make the changes. It's like, okay, you know. But Bukele really played more into what he felt were the issues, I'm imagining, that Trump cares about. Namely, I've got these guys in this prison for you, and I'm not going to let them out. And Bukele actually said, because the American government has admitted that they've made a mistake, and they have unlawfully, as determined by the courts, imprisoned in another country an American who was legally a resident of this country. He was unlawfully arrested and unlawfully deported. And the unlawfulness was wall to wall, even as a judge's order demanded that none of these people be transported out of this country. And even as the judge's order stipulated, and any planes that are in the air or that haven't taken off will turn back and abort this mission, they still went on with it. And then this is the fruit of that poison tree, right? You end up with, we're not going to do anything. The Supreme Court has told them that they have to facilitate the return of this person. But the thing that the court didn't say, I guess, is this is the position of the administration, is they didn't say we have to return him right away. They said we have to facilitate it. What does that mean? So that's the interpretation, for example, that Stephen Miller is offering, that Donald Trump is offering. And what you saw today, though, was not working the edges and kind of working what I just described, which is reinterpreting essentially the Supreme Court's unanimous decision. Instead, you have stonewalling. You've got stonewalling on the part of Bukele, and you've got stonewalling on the part of Trump. Bukele said, I can't get him if I wanted to. I have no control over these people. It was the weirdest thing. I don't know if anybody heard it. It was
who's
the weirdest
in charge?
thing.
Like, who's in charge? Who? If you can't get him out, the president of El Salvador, then who? Are you just saying like the prison is running the country? What's happening?
Asked by reporters at the Oval Office on Monday whether he has the power to release Abrego Garcia inside El Salvador, Bukele said he does, but that his administration isn't, quote, very fond of releasing terrorists in his country. You want us to go back to releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? That's not going to happen, he said. And then he said this prior. He said he doesn't have the power to return to the United States a man mistakenly deported to his country. How can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States? He kept being asked whether he would return Garcia, who the Trump administration concedes was mistakenly deported to El Salvador's mega prison because of this administrative error. And he keeps saying, I don't control it and I can't return him. The Trump administration is claiming, of course, that Garcia, who's a Maryland father, and he has no ties to any gang membership or group that has been demonstrated in any way. They're saying he's a member of the MS-13 gang. Bukele went on to say that his country is very eager to help the United States tackle what he calls its crime and terrorism problem. We're very eager to help, he says. We know you have a crime problem, a terrorism problem that you need help with. And we're a small country, but if we can help, we will do it. What I thought was equally shocking was that in that conversation, Donald Trump expanded the wish list to the deportation of those who are American citizens, but who are criminals or not wanted in the country any longer. So now you have Bukele, who has stipulated to the fact that he's really not going to return this Garcia guy. Now, I know David Katz has come on this show. He's a brilliant legal analyst. And I actually exchanged emails with him because, I think these predictions that I've made, on the pessimistic side of things have really come to pass. I know everybody likes to, I'm such a pessimist. I'm not a pessimist. I'm a bit, I think, of a realist, and I don't get high on the hopium that something's going to happen. Katz felt correctly. He predicted that the Supreme Court would tell him to return that man, and they did. But what I said was, I don't care what the Supreme Court said. They're not going to return that guy. He's not coming back. And now I would say, so I was exchanging emails with David Katz over the weekend, just kind of re-emphasizing this point. Now with this Bukele thing, I'm thinking they really don't want to return him, and here's why. He's become a cause celeb. He's become emblematic of a mistake. And the last thing Donald Trump and his administration ever want to admit to is a mistake. Bukele will make sure that he's not returned, and Trump, all he has to do is say, hey, we're trying, we're having trouble locating him. I'm dealing with the El Salvadoran president, et cetera.
You can't sit down with the president of El Salvador in the Oval Office and have the guy sit there and say, I can't return him, and I wouldn't even if I wanted to. That's not facilitating. You're sitting there with the president of El Salvador. You could make a deal and hammer it out and have it done in 5 minutes.
Oh, you could, 30 seconds. Trump says, I want him back, and it's done.
Right.
Absolutely right.
So, that's just silly. It's silly to say that you're even trying to facilitate.
No, I completely agree.
Is how they can even, Caroline Leavitt even said, it was an administrative error. The lawyers in court filings have said it was a mistake that this guy was deported. And now all of a sudden you have Stephen Miller standing up and saying it wasn't a mistake. He's a criminal. You can't have it both ways.
You have a little bit of it, Tony. I don't know what part of it you have, but here the two of them are. And Trump actually, this is where Trump, I believe he was riffing about something else. He was riffing from one thing to the next. It was a lengthy, he was feeling it today with Bukele decide. Go ahead, please, Tony. No, I thought you have that. Yeah.
Also, not suggesting that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right? How can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States. You could release him inside El Salvador. Yeah, but I'm not releasing. We're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. We just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into the releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? No, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, so there he is saying it. I'm telling you, he's not coming back. That guy's not coming back. It's awful. It's horrifying. And then the notion that this is just the beginning, because you'll jail opposition, you'll deport opposition, you'll declare somebody an enemy of the state, you'll declare somebody a gang member, and there's no due process, and people are deported. Again, you may not care about these guys, but you have to care about this trend, this policy, because it may include many, many, many Americans who fall into the wrong categories as far as this administration is concerned. It's deeply disturbing. And it's heartbreaking for these individuals who have been swept up in all of this. I mean, I get it. These MS-13, it's MS-13 one day, it's the other one, the Venezuelan gang members the other day, and on the next day, it'll be some other group. I mean, they're serving up these reasons to deport people all the time. So I find it immensely dispiriting. But that's what was happening today at the White House.
As a matter of fact, they have Trump at the Bukele meeting saying, yeah, as a matter of fact, I wouldn't mind taking U.S. citizens and deporting them to this mega prison as well.
Yeah.
Here he is. It's crazy.
I'd do something. We'd help them out. Yeah, we help them. They're great facilities, very strong facilities, and they don't play games. I'd like to go a step further. I mean, I said it to Pam. I don't know what the laws are. We always have to obey the laws, but we also have homegrown criminals that push people into subways, that hit elderly ladies on the back of the head with a baseball bat when they're not looking, that are absolute monsters. I'd like to include them in the group of people to get them out of the country, but you'll have to be looking at the laws on that, Steve, okay?
Yeah.
What?
The laws?
You want to take U.S. citizens and throw them in a mega prison in El Salvador?
I mean, here's the deal. Dude, we have a setup for that already. We have prisons in this country.
Right.
And there are a lot of private prisons. So don't take away business from, your pals who run the private prisons. It's a window into the way he thinks. And it's deeply disturbing. So
The Mark Thompson Show.
A man scaled an iron security fence in the middle of the night, eluded cops, broke into the Pennsylvania governor's mansion, set a fire there that left significant damage, forced Governor Josh Shapiro and his family and guests to evacuate the building. This happened yesterday. The man was captured later in the day. He'll face charges of attempted murder, terrorism, aggravated arson, and aggravated assault. But he and his wife, Shapiro says, and 2 dogs and another family had celebrated the Jewish holiday of Passover at their residence on Saturday. They were awakened by state troopers pounding on their doors at about 2 a.m. on Sunday. They fled, and firefighters put the fire out, but there were many, many, I guess, irreplaceable items, and this mansion itself is a, what am I trying to, Kim, it's
historical
Thank you.
building.
That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
And so for that reason, there was a lot of damage that, again, not to mention it's terrorism. It's domestic terrorism, And
Was it anti-Semitic? Did the person who was arrested say he did it because the Shapiro family is Jewish and it was a Passover thing that they were trying to mark?
There's been no reporting on that. Okay. It's been suggested that if this guy did it and it can be linked to the Passover, then it would be, upgraded. But I mean, it shouldn't need to be upgraded. The guy tried to burn alive, a family of a governor, and I'd say that guy shouldn't see the light of day yet. No specific motive has been revealed. But this is a quote from Shapiro. But we know a few truths. First, this type of violence is not okay. This kind of violence is becoming far too common in our society. And I don't give a damn if it's coming from one particular side or the other, directed at one particular party or another, or one particular person or another. It's not okay, and it has to stop. We have to be better than this, he says. So, I mean, there was, apparently they damaged a large room that is often used for entertaining crowds. There are art displays, a charred piano, tables, walls, metal buffet, serving dishes.
Wow. Look at that damage.
I mean, it's pretty awful. Pretty awful. I mean, I guess I say, this guy who did this should not see the light of day. So
send him to El Salvador.
Send him to
He's out.
So what else do we have, Tony? I've lost Kim. I'm waiting on Gary Dietrich, am I not?
Yeah, he should be here any minute.
Okay. So I don't want to get too deep into anything else. So I may just quickly. Oh, there he is. Okay, good. I have a couple of things for Gary that are kind of off the beaten track. So yeah, we'll talk about tariffs, and we'll talk about the politics of this meeting with Bukele at the White House. But I also want to ask him about some of the other things that are going on. And one of those things we touched on last week. You'll remember I spoke about AOC and Bernie Sanders and their tour. And AOC and Bernie Sanders have really lit up huge crowds. I mean, 30,000 plus, with some very impressive, angry, but peaceful demonstrations against the rising oligarchy, as they're characterizing it, or the established oligarchy. And the buy-in has been pretty extraordinary. In this particular one, yesterday, there was a huge rally in Los Angeles. And then Bernie Sanders went to Coachella. And we have a little bit of both, and then I'll get to Gary. Go ahead. This is
country faces some very difficult challenges.
Bernie Sanders at Coachella.
And the future of what happens to America is dependent upon your generation. Now, you can turn away and you can ignore what goes on, but if you do that, you do it at your own peril. We need you to stand up to fight for justice. To fight for economic justice, social justice, and racial justice. Now, we got a president of the United States who, I agree, he thinks that climate change is a hoax. He is dangerously wrong. And you and I are going to have to stand up to the fossil fuel industry.
So that's an animated crowd, and there was an animated crowd in Los Angeles a day earlier. I mean, this is definitely tapping into a feeling, but the question is it a politically viable feeling that can actually fight back against an existing momentum that's associated with the dominant party in this country, which is the GOP. That is to be continued, and we'll talk to Gary about it next.
The Mark Thompson Show.
This guy is the political analyst for iHeart Radio, also across the CBS television stations, and our former colleague at KGO in San Francisco. Brilliant political mind, and I think he brings a kind of political agnosticism to things. You know, he'll kind of he'll play it down the middle. Let's hear him. Gary Dietrich, everybody. Yeah. Love my Gary Dietrich.
Hey, my friend.
Hey, Gary, I watched with interest because you and I had talked about this AOC Bernie Sanders phenomenon. And there's definitely a lot of momentum here when you look at the crowd size and you look at reaction. There's a huge crowd in Los Angeles. Of course, they've had huge crowds in the East. Then he goes to Coachella, and of course, there's already a huge crowd there. But, you know, his reception was, you heard it, very, very warm. I'm wondering how that translates into a political viability or into a political movement, or is this the way political movements start, with the kind of germination that we're seeing?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mark. And let's start with this. There's never been an 80-something-year-old on the Coachella stage ever in history, and there may never be again. I mean, let's just tick down a couple things real quick, all right? It is absolutely remarkable to observers like me. Seriously, we talked about this back when he was running for president, that the person right now in the United States that is resonating most with young 20-somethings is an 80-something-year-old Bernie Sanders. That's number one. You just think about that. that ought to cause people in the Democratic Party be going like, hey, what gives here? Secondly, he has said again recently on national television, he considers himself still an independent, not a Democrat. And I think this is to start moving into the politics of this. I think there's a plus and a minus for this for the Democrats. One is he is getting crowds that nobody else is even attempting, right? Even at these town halls that people are trying to hold in Republican-leaning districts, et cetera, they might get a few hundred people and they're animated, right? But I mean, these are massive crowds in the tens of thousands. That certainly says something about the level of interest in what he is talking about and the institutions that he is challenging and the presidency that he's challenging. And in some ways, it's reminiscent of the start of the anti-war movement, right? Decades ago, when these kinds of rallies with this kind of demographic, now it wasn't by an 80-something, it was by people like Joan Baez and Bob Dylan and others. But you know what? That's the kind of feel I think it has, at least in its sort of germination, the seed of it. You know what I mean, Mark?
Sure. In fact, that's a great comparison, the Vietnam stuff. That's really interesting. And, I wouldn't normally post this guy because he's a pain in our, he's kind of he's a MAGA head in our comments, but I think he does, on the heels of what you just said, this is provocative. Delwood Kelp writes, AOC plus Sanders spells McGovern redux. So that's a reference essentially to the fact that at the end of that run that you just described, the Vietnam War, the protests, 68, then 72. I mean, this was like the country was roiling with all of them. I mean, my God, the nation's cities were on fire through the 60s. Then you had this huge anti-war movement, massive crowds. George McGovern became the candidate, and what happened?
He got wiped out.
Yeah.
I mean, that for those people that don't know, go back quite that far. McGovern's election was an absolute disaster at the hands of Richard Nixon. Now, we could get into all the other things that went along with that, Watergate, everything else, right? But the bottom line was that for Democrats was a wipeout. So let me make my last point on this Bernie Sanders AOC thing. It is absolutely remarkable that Democrats as a party and an organization have kind of ceded the stage literally to Bernie Sanders. I mean, there's nobody else other than AOC taking that stage with him. You would think when you have crowds that large being generated that somebody from the party would want to step up, step out. Let me just throw out a bunch of names, right? A Cory Booker, who was on the floor of the Senate. A Josh Shapiro, who just had his house torched over the weekend, right? I mean, you'd think there would be somebody who'd say, you know what? I want to get up there and be one of the voices of our party. We can't just let Bernie do it as the independent guy who challenged our standard bearers for our party nomination. So it's sort of remarkable to me, Mark, twofold. One, the crowds are growing clearly and the enthusiasm is growing on the one hand. On the other hand, the Democratic Party has got to kickstart this thing if they want to get on board the bandwagon for 18 months from now in the midterm elections.
Such a great point about the fact that, the rest of the party is kind of quiet, oddly. CC Ryder says, I have no problem being a loud and proud Democrat. The left needs to stop eating their own and making excuses for being a Democrat. Go hard and be strong in liberal values, climate, voting, abortion. It's interesting. I mean, this is part of a much longer conversation that we will have as to what ideas and what priorities get traction with the voting public. But there is definitely a crisis in the Democratic Party because you've got people like CC Ryder who say, hey, you got to get it out there. You got these are laudable goals and moral tenets that this party has that the other party does not have. And you've got to fly that flag. And there are others who say, I want to be a moderate. You saw the Whitmer meeting in the Oval Office. I mean, it was there's a mishmash on the Democratic side, and as you say, everybody's MIA except for Sanders and AOC.
Yeah, and even amongst some of the well-known names. Now, Whitmer claims she got trapped into that meeting, etc. But the bottom line, she went to the White House willingly to talk about jobs in her state, and this is the challenge for a lot of people. It's a challenge for Whitmer right now. It's a challenge for Gavin Newsom in California. How do you get behind the things that you say, yeah, you know what? that Whitmer's saying the tariffs are good in some sense for the guys in my auto industry. Okay, that's the conundrum she has right now. That's the rock and the hard place, and that's why she said she went there. Gavin Newsom is doing some really interesting things, as you well know. The issue on trans folks and women's sports a few weeks ago on his podcast. More recently, in the last week, saying he's going to steer his own course with foreign nations over the tariffs, and now there's national experts saying he doesn't have any power to do anything seriously about that. So they're stuck, Mark, between, okay, some of this stuff we can get behind, some of it we can't, and they're kind of frozen in time, at least for right now, politically, I think, until there's more chinks in the armor that they feel like they can take advantage of with Trump.
Yeah, in a way, I don't blame Whitmer for trying to get some sort of understanding going with the dominant power force in America right now. It's a weird thing to say because you can. I get it. You're enabling. You're justifying. You're tacitly okaying this guy and his policies that are totally loony. This is the view of many Democrats. It's the view of myself on some level in terms of his policies. But on another level, as a governor of a state, you have a responsibility to those people who, occupy that state, your constituency, to make a deal.
Yeah. And
Very hard.
I think that's the challenge right now. There's the party is truly split. About half of the party thinks you go hard opposition all the time, 24/7. You don't work with Trump on anything, right? On the other hand, you've got people saying, look, we've got to deal with some of these issues that are on, say, Pennsylvania is true. Same thing, with petroleum, with manufacturing, steel, of course, in Pennsylvania, a really big issue in terms of its legacy, its heritage. So that's where they find themselves, stuck between how do you work on the things you want to work on and opposed to things vociferously you don't. I mean, one of my alma maters came out today, Harvard, saying we're not going to work with we're not going to cede to the president on these demands for our funding. Reportedly, that esteemed Ivy League institution gets about $1 billion in federal funding for research in these things. So there's a lot. I don't know how this is all going to shake out, but we're in some quite interesting territory right now, Mark.
Well, and then you see the federal government, you're in California, and they're saying, hey, we're going to open up all the U.S. national forests, including California. In fact, actually, California is sort of going to be the test case, maybe, to timber production. They want to increase U.S. timber production by 25%, and they'll get all 18 of California's national forests involved. And there's no clear plan, but immediately expanding this timber production and doing it in the national forests there in California, that's a tough one to swallow if you're Gavin Newsom, but you have no choice.
Well, Gavin's caught between a rock and a hard place on that one, too. And interestingly, you bring this up, Mark. I was thinking about this issue coming on today because just last week, I met with the chair of a board of supervisor of one of the major forest counties in California. And he welcomes what Trump's doing. And the reason is this: fires. He said, look, even Gavin has been behind this deal. In fact, they've allocated state monies for thinning the forest. And you see this a lot. You can actually drive around now, like the west shore of Lake Tahoe. You can see it where they're doing it and have done it. So it does need to be done. Of course, environmentalists say very selectively, right? And that's kind of been Gavin's approach. But this chair of the board of supervisors said, look, we got to do this. He had a massive tens of thousands of acre fire in his own district just several years ago that completely wiped out a mountain town. And he says, we've been waiting for this kind of authority to get our forests cleaned up. In fact, there were feds, the Forest Service said 10 years ago where this town was. They identified this is a very high danger zone. We need to get in there and clean it up. It never happened. And the town burned down. So here again, the supervisor showed me the map of where these national forest lands are all over the country. Check this out. You know where most of them are? In the blue states of Washington, Oregon, and California. So here again, these three democratically leaning states are going to have to figure out how do they work with the Trump administration to thin out forests where they know they're danger zones, and how do they not just sort of open it up carte blanche to clear-cutting, random.
Exactly. But the last thing that you've just said is so critical, because there's a difference between forest fire remediation, fire prevention remediation type moves, and the idea that you're just clear cutting. I mean, there it really is a difference. And I don't mean to suggest that they would do anything reckless. This administration, everything seems so clearly thought out. But I'm guessing they're on the clear cutting side. Okay, so but
Mark, I will tell you. I'm sorry to interrupt. I didn't comment on, because I didn't see, and I don't know that there's yet developed specifics about how that's going to happen.
Yeah, there's not. So to be fair, there's nothing handed down, and that's what the Forest Service is saying as well. Hey, I wanted to play something for you. Then I want to get to Bukele, and I want to get to this guy who is languishing in El Salvador in prison. But Tony, can you play for Gary the Stephen A. Smith thing? He was asked about his presidential run, and Stephen A. Smith. He's an ESPN commentator and very high profile. Just signed this huge deal at ESPN and so he was on with I think Jake Tapper over the weekend on. Well, it doesn't matter who he was on with. Anyway, he was on ABC. This is I think Jonathan Karl was talking to him. Go ahead, please.
The bigger picture here is that Elizabeth Warren was just on with you. You're going to have a multitude of Democratic representatives on with you. They talk and they talk and they talk, but what can they do? They position themselves to do absolutely nothing. I didn't hear anything about tariffs from the Democrats before the election. Trump had been preaching about this for the longest time. The way people decry his strategy, he's been bloviating about that. They said nothing about it. Instead, they talked about everything from woke culture to cancel culture to abortion rights and all of this other stuff. But that wasn't going to win the election. And that's what we have to look at. What is it going to take to get the job done? That's why somebody who's a sports analyst, for crying out loud, is in the daggone polls. It's not somebody big up in me. It's an indictment against a Democratic Party that doesn't have leadership and doesn't have a vision. And it's sad.
I saw you mentioned Bill Maher. I saw Steve Bannon was on with Bill Maher, and he was asked what Democrats he worries about. And the only name he mentioned as a Democrat he'd be worried about. So are you really thinking about running for president? Is this something you think?
Listen, I have no choice, because I've had elected officials, and I'm not going to give their names, elected officials coming up to me. I've had folks who are pundits come up to me. I've had folks that got a lot of money, billionaires and others, that have talked to me about exploratory committees and things of that nature. I'm not a politician. I've never had a desire to be a politician. I just signed a contract extension with ESPN. I am very, very
pretty
happy
good one too
with my day job. I'm very happy with my boss. This is a pretty damn good one. Just right. It's a pretty damn good contract. I couldn't be happier. But here's the reality. People have walked up to me, including my own pastor, for crying out loud, who has said to me, you don't know what God has planned for you. At least show the respect to the people who believe in you, who respect you, who believe that you can make a difference in this country, to leave the door open for any possibilities 2 to 3 years down the line.
Okay, good stuff. So God, again, is in this plan. I love it when God sends those memos that, Stephen A. Smith, you got to be, leave the door open. Give me your thoughts on this. And the only reason I would dignify this with even a conversation this early, I know this is way, way early, but the other thing I think it reflects is sort of where we are in American society, where celebrity really trumps everything else. It trumps public service. It trumps policy. He's totally out to lunch with that tariff BS. Like if the Democrats had talked about tariffs, I mean, that would have been one more thing. What are you doing talking about tariff policy? It's not that, again, it's the celebrity that Trump brings when he talks about tariff policy. It's the way he talks about it, talking about being ripped off for years, et cetera. So, but the fact is, and then I'll shut up, I want to get your thoughts, but the fact is the celebrity here, Gary, I think is the thing that makes him the shimmering object right now politically.
Well, let's honor those who both the Judaic and Christian faith this week in their holy weeks and say, as far as we can ascertain biblically, God is decidedly nonpartisan. Okay, so let's just cut him a break here on Holy Week, okay, and say let's not try to pigeonhole him. But it's interesting you'd bring that up because that's a whole nother show. We should spend some time talking about the history of God in modern American politics, because from black churches to the Christian right, I mean, it's all over the map. Sure. But I think we can give God a pass on whether he's behind one of these guys or not. But here's the thing. I think you're onto something, Mark, about modern American politics. Now, let's just try as best we can to take the faces and the names off of this. But there's another guy who had no political experience, was a TV celebrity type person, and got elected president. There was also another guy who was a movie star type person who got elected California governor. And there was another guy who got elected to both. Now, everybody knows I'm talking about Ronald Reagan, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Donald Trump. So should it surprise us right now, at this moment in history, with the Democratic Party truly in its own estimations floundering, and as we talked about earlier in this segment, Mark, no clear leadership stepping forward to do what Bernie Sanders is doing, that there's a vacuum. And so Stephen A. Smith has made no bones. People love his kind of glibness, and he's thoughtful and he's challenging. Everybody's putting him on their air. So, it doesn't surprise me that at this point in time, establishment politics doesn't seem to be getting it done on the right or the left for many people.
Yeah, I think that's so well said. I mean, it's not just a celebrity; it's the void. It's something's going to fill that void, and in this case, now in modern American politics, it can be a high-profile celebrity who speaks well, as you say, who's glib, and he's a rhetorical ninja in a way. He just keeps moving forward. I now want to get to Bukele and Trump, who were at the White House together today. The El Salvadoran president saying, I couldn't return this guy who was mistakenly imprisoned if I wanted to, and I don't know how I do it. Am I supposed to smuggle him back to the U.S.? I mean, it was this weird kind of dance, but clearly Trump and he were vibing, and then Trump even opened the door to perhaps the deportation of Americans who are guilty of any number of crimes that we don't want them in this country anymore. And if I can make that deal, I got to check with Pam Bondi, who want to do it within the law. But and the last thing I'll say is, they say they want to do it within the law, but the law, the highest court in the land, has said you got to return that guy who was deported mistakenly. And they're basically telling the court, can't do it, and they're shining it on.
Yeah. Well, at some point in time, we are going to reach the, immovable object, unstoppable force moment when the U.S. Supreme Court says, and this might be it, you got to do this and see, and we're going to see who blinks, right? Is it going to be the Trump administration? I mean, I'm guessing that what these two nation state heads are saying is, well, it's the prison system, and in El Salvador, it's the courts, and I'm the president, but I don't have, jurisdiction over the courts, and yada, yada, yada. They could get the guy back if they needed to. I mean, let's just be honest about that, right? These things have a way of being worked out. If the U.S. Supreme Court says it's got to happen, there's a way to make it happen. I think the larger concern, and that isn't to minimize at all this individual or his family and the other larger concerns about it, but Trump floating the idea of incarcerating Americans on foreign soil is a whole new ballgame, right? That is something that I think U.S. courts would have a huge problem with. You're going to start shipping U.S. citizens, bona fide U.S. citizens, to incarcerate them in other countries. I just think that is a non-starter from the U.S. Supreme Court on down. Now, I'm not a legal mind, but I can tell you from a political point of view, as well as I understand it, also about the judiciary, that's just a non-starter.
Yeah, so many in the chat agree. I mean, it seems as though that's an extraordinary bridge too far. Although I would have said that defying the Supreme Court in the way that they were being openly defied today in that meeting in the White House, that might have been a bridge too far. I mean, the Supreme Court hands down a decision saying you will facilitate the return of this guy. And these two guys who run these two countries of El Salvador and the U.S., they basically say, yeah, wish we could, just really can't get to it. Too busy.
Well, I don't think they said too busy. I think they're citing constraints that they believe prevent them from doing so. But
they didn't say too. But my point is, they've kind of claimed they couldn't do it if they wanted to, type thing. He did say that I couldn't do it if I wanted to.
Yeah. Well, that's going to be the argument, about what they cannot do. But we knew we were going to come to this moment at some point. We'll see where it goes. Hey, real quick.
Yes, sir.
Back to that thing about celebrities, etc. I just want to comment on this from a sociological perspective. Okay, that's my undergrad background. the decline in the faith of institutions is really what led to what we're talking about now. In other words, the lack of faith, and this polling has been done now for decades, but the continued decline in the faith in institutions, from political parties to court systems to Congress to the presidency, is what has led us to where we are now, where people, even inside the traditional two-party system, are saying, you know, I just don't know if those boys and girls can get it done on either side. And so therefore the Trumps, therefore the Stephen A. Smiths. I mean, I don't know where this leads, Mark. I think 28 is going to be a huge test, because we'll have open primaries for both political parties. You know, there's not going to be a coronation of J.D. Vance. Everybody in the GOP is even making that clear. Trump has even said that in so many words. So that, to me, is going to be a real litmus test about where we are as a nation going forward.
I agree with you. I think the one thing that, and this is a very intriguing conversation, actually, could go on for a while, but I feel as though the fire of the government is flawed and they can't help you. I feel that that was really lit by the GOP in a big way. Reagan had the big, the line, which is so, what was it? The words that you fear the most, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. I feel like that fire was, I don't mean to, I'm sorry, to assign blame, but when blame, I think, can be assigned, it should be assigned. And I feel as though this is the culmination, if you will. You're so right to, I think, underscore the fact that the confidence in government has been eroded. But what you're seeing them going after now is institutions that were working perfectly well. I mean, you know as well as I do, the government does a lot of great things, and sort of running it down as a bunch of incompetence and waste, et cetera, that's really not fair to government, which does have incompetence and waste in it, but it also does a lot of great things. So now you get to Social Security. We've all paid into Social Security. This isn't some handout. And they have slashed and burned this very dependable institution in American government, to the point that now there may be interruption in checks, most certainly interruption in service. Speak to that. Like, the next step that's happened, in addition to putting Trump in power, you now have a real diminution of government power and some of the most dependable institutions of government power.
Yeah, let me get to the institutional problem in a second. Let me say politically, the Democrats have taken up that same call. With Trump back in office, there's questions. They're raising the questions about trust the courts. Should we reform the Supreme Court, right? That was a big conversation leading up to last year's election. They're asking the questions. Can you trust government under a Trump administration? So that clarion call is going out on both sides. Now, as far as the institutions go, here's what we can pretty much, from historical political perspective, say for sure. If Social Security checks start being interrupted, or major services that the average American counts on and knows that the government at this juncture has to provide, that is an absolute recipe for a complete wipeout of the GOP next year in the midterm elections and in 28. I mean, the old saw about Social Security being the third rail, the untouchable electric rail in politics. There's a lot of truth to that. And your political fortunes rise and fall about whether the average person feels like what the government is doing right now is helping them or hurting them. They determined last fall that the administration in power was not helping them very much, and in fact, probably hurting them to some degree. That's why they voted Trump in. You look at the exit polls, especially when it came to young Latino and Black males, that's what they were saying. Okay, they're not helping us. And the Democratic Party's talking a good talk, but they're not helping us. So I sort of say, at your own peril, do you risk the things that Americans really care about when it comes to the ballot box?
All right, my time with you is really out, and I'm just going to ask you one last question, and it's about the election and the election process, which I think is going to become really relevant here, as you suggest, in the next couple of years. The new election requirements, the last name, and you can run through the dance again. They've raised the bar on your ability to vote in this country now in a couple of interesting ways that require sort of in-person re-registration, and even in-person, oftentimes legal changing of a last name, for example. I mean, so as to represent a married woman's new name such that she won't be disenfranchised. It's a weird thing because, well, you know the story, the tradition of taking on the husband's name, etc. So can you speak to the real impact that will have? And again, if maybe fill in a couple of blanks I've left out if necessary.
Yeah. Well, most of this is going to happen at the state level because a reminder to people, we hold 50 separate state elections to elect a president, for example. We don't hold one national one. That's why we have an electoral college. That's why you have state by state regulations on voting. So there's unlikely, Mark, to be a successful edict from Washington that is able to change this wholesale because there's a lot of power endowed to the states to do this. All right. But what I think you are going to see, and you already are seeing, even in states like California, is a very pared back version of this. For example, as simple as this, I'll just end with this. Voter ID, right? Even in California, I think there's a very good chance that we're going to see a measure on the California ballot. You have to have a government issued photo ID that shows you are who you are when you walk into that polling place. Because remember, in places like California, you even have same day registration. So that's the bugaboo along with the voting, is registering and voting. I think you're going to see that pick up some speed. There's a lot of polling that's been done that the average person thinks, that might not be a bad idea, at least that one thing. We'll see where that goes.
Right. It does seem to poll pretty well. So you're right. That's not some radioactive concept that there be some sort of a voter ID. Interesting. And of course, many view that as a voter suppression. Love our time together. I've taken advantage of you today. I think I kept you a couple minutes late. Thank you so much. You can find Gary across the iHeart Radio network and on CBS television stations nationwide. Gary, thank you. Look forward to next week. Gary Dietrich, everybody. Good stuff. By the way, Gary is brought to us every week by Bill Campbell. Shout out to Bill Campbell in Northern California at Remax Gold. If you are in Northern California, you're relocating to Northern California, you're leaving Northern California, and you want a highly respected real estate professional, Bill Campbell is your call. Text him or call him at Remax Gold, 530-448-7474, 530-448-7474. Bill Campbell at Remax Gold.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
Loving it, loving it. Thank you for being here. We are a live show this Monday. We come on Monday through Friday, 2 to 4 p.m. in the East, 11 to 1 in the West. And it's so great to have everybody joining us live. But most people listen and watch after the fact in delay. So if you're one of them, shout out to you. Really great stuff. I did get Kim and Tony. I did get some blowback in the Mark Thompson mailbag. And I did want to share.
I've received a lot of positive letters.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, well, this is, to be fair to me, which I hate to do, but there was a misunderstanding, I think, on some level about the fluoride thing that we got off on last Wednesday. Fluoride was mentioned in a litany of things with respect to RFK Jr. RFK Jr., don't support him, don't think he should be running that agency, don't agree with him on vax, don't agree with him on any number of things. But fluoride in the water was mentioned, and I said, I hate that I agree with him on this, but I just don't think that there should be any additives that don't need to be there in the water. And I heard from everybody, you don't get it, how can you, be so smart, but also so stupid, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, Mark, how can you be so smart and so stupid? What?
So, yeah, it's
what?
It's a very...
You just don't get it, do you?
I don't get it. You're right. There was a a dude who's a dentist who reached me, a couple of people who were dentists, I think a guy and a lady dentist. He says that essentially, fluoridation is a key part of keeping America's dental health healthy.
Mm-hmm.
That's been the ongoing policy for a long time. But I would say that is missing the point of what I was saying. And then somebody else wrote me a long email, even longer than the dentists. I thought the dentists would have like the ranking officers on deck when it came to length of email. But somebody wrote me a super long email detailing all of the different things that are added in water. And the fact is, if you didn't have these additives in water, the water would make you sick and could kill you. I wasn't saying that you can't add anything to water. This person says, remember Flint, Michigan? How many people died? How many people suffered from lifetime disabilities? Why? Because they took their water right out of the river and neglected to add a chemical that kept lead in the pipes from leaching into the water. Your position is that this was just fine as the water was untreated. No, that's not my position. What about Hetch Hetchy water here in the Bay Area? This person's in the San Francisco Bay Area. Untreated water from Hetch Hetchy contains, among other things, E. coli, salmonella, then a bunch of other diseases that I can't, and that I, things that bacterial pathogens that I can't pronounce. All removed by both filtering and adding antibacterials. I guess you're okay letting all the bacteria find its way into your iced tea, he says, Mark. And he goes on and on and on. He says, my point is that the water must be treated or we'd all be in serious health situations like many third world countries who don't have the resources to treat water. I look at water treatment, including fluoride, as a vaccine against dozens, if not hundreds of ailments and diseases. Thanks for listening. Dan from the Bay Area, and he is an OG from the old KGO days, and I think he's a supporter of the show. Let me just, again, clarify this, and then I will move on. I believe that obviously you have to add things to the water. You add a bunch of things to the water to make it safe to drink. I get that. What I'm saying is, beyond that, I wouldn't add anything to the water. I don't know about fluoride. Fluoride may be, it's good for your teeth. Great. I don't want it added to my water. Vitamin C is great for you. I mentioned this before. I interviewed and read the books of Linus Pauling. Linus Pauling, he's a Nobel Prize-winning scientist who wrote literally chapter and verse about the power of vitamin C. Vitamin C can help you through all kinds of things. It can help prevent all kinds of illnesses. Should vitamin C be added to our water? I mean, I don't want America to be a pilot project on additives because at the time the medical community felt, hey, this is a really good thing to add because kids' teeth will be much better or adults' teeth will be much better. I mean, are these the same doctors who were smoking cigarettes in the 60s telling me that it was safe? So all I'm saying is, you guys may totally be right about the fluoride. I know they use fluoride and they brush it in a dentist chair. Clearly it has a positive effect, but you don't drink it. They put it on your teeth. And then what do? You spit it out. There's a reason for that. If it were so safe, then, well, Mark, these are very small amounts of fluoride in the water. Please don't scare. I'm not trying to scare anyone. Clearly, people are living long lives and they're drinking this water, which has fluoride in it. I drink a ton of water. And so maybe I'm, the lab rat that is going to tell you. But I would just say if something is an additive that you don't need in the water, then I just don't want it in the water. That's where I am. Okay. I'm all for the purification. I wasn't saying don't add anything. I was saying don't add something else that need not be added. So thank you for your letters. Yeah, I'm with you, Jay. Not again, Mark. Really? Are we going to do this again? Yeah, exactly. Mark, what do you want? Maybe you can be a spokesperson for RFK Jr.?
Oh, no. No.
Yeah. What is this? My My 94-year-old grandmother drinks fluoride. LOL. Says Northern Tier. Well, that does it then. You know what? I'm totally convinced. I just needed one 94-year-old who does it. So that thank you for that.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Oh my God! I'll tell you, it's interesting always to see what lights up everybody. You know. Anyway, but I will say that I've heard some really well-reasoned arguments for adding the fluoride from our audience, from dentists, and also from just people who seem to know the area pretty well. My thing is, I just wish, you know, we didn't need to add anything. So
I also got a letter from a dentist after your rant on fluoride with
I've received a lot of positive letters.
Okay.
Yeah, it even blew over to me a little bit. And this dentist said, as long as I have my children brush twice a day with toothpaste containing fluoride, they will be fine.
Yeah, and thank you. That is the last thing I would say is, and what do they do, as I say, after they've brushed with fluoride? They spit it out. They don't swallow it.
Yeah.
So when it comes to adding something, says Harry Magnan with a $5 super chat, when it comes to adding something to water, I like Herb Cain's suggestion. Add vitamin V.
I don't know the reference. What's vitamin V?
The science is ridiculous.
I don't know. I love it. I love
look it up now.
Yeah.
What?
Vitamin V, is that vodka?
Herb Cain's drink of choice, the vodka martini he called vitamin V.
I was going to say, got to be vodka. Right. Yeah, everybody's got it in the chat. Or Viagra, says Rich. There you go. I mean, whatever your you know, of choice, whatever your poison of choice is. All right, but that was it from the. Those are a few of the emails I got. Our email is themarkthompsonshow@gmail.com if you're trying to get in touch. We are
The Mark Thompson Show.
We're always open to take in what you have to say. The tariff war. It is not something that the GOP is agreed upon. In fact, there are high-profile GOPers who are pushing back against the president's tariff war, just in general. What's the strategy seems to be the most common question being asked. It's being asked by everyone. You heard Elizabeth Warren this week on one of the Sunday shows talking about it. You hear GOP senators and congresspeople, particularly senators, asking these questions. So Senator Ron Johnson says he wants to know the end game for Trump's tariff plan. He was on News Nation, and he says that businesses are looking for certainty. Of course, the one thing you don't get from this administration in any way is certainty. There's a 90-day pause on the higher, what are being called reciprocal tariffs, even though they're not, for selected countries. But after that, it's suggested that there are going to be any number of additional tariffs, not just the tariffs that Trump was talking about, but specific sectors of the economy and of the imports will be targeted. Let's get to some video. I believe this is Rand Paul pushing back on the president's plan. Go ahead, Tony.
How did we all get here? I mean, the whole debate is so fundamentally backwards and upside down. It's based on a fallacy. And the fallacy is this, that somehow in a trade, someone must lose. That somehow when you trade with someone, there's a loser and someone's taking advantage of you and China's ripping you off or Japan's ripping you off. It's absolutely a fallacy. Every trade that occurs in the marketplace is mutually beneficial. If you have a free society and I trade with you, if you want to sell me your coat and I give you $200 for it, we both agree to it and we're both happy with the trade. No American consumer trades with China. They trade with Walmart, or they may buy something from China, but they individually buy something they want and they make a decision. The trade is always a win-win. Now, you could artificially do this accounting between countries and say, oh, trade deficit, look at this trade deficit. But I have a trade deficit with my grocery store. The people who employ me, if I work for Corvette and they employ me, they have a trade deficit with my labor. They buy my labor and I never buy their cars. You can have this artificial accounting and it makes it look like a bad thing, but you have to ask yourself, is trade good or bad? And if you look at the trade deficit, in times of a recession, the trade deficit goes down. So if the tariffs push us into a recession, we could reduce the trade deficit because we're all buying less stuff. We have to get back to the fundamentals of, is trade good or is trade bad?
Yeah, there you go. I mean, I think that really reflects what is a strong feeling on the part of GOPers even. That's why this is notable, that in his own party, the president is getting pushback. The other place he's getting pushback, of course, pushback is coming from Wall Street, business owners, and small business people are being crushed by this. There is no way to plan when you don't know when a tariff is going to happen and how big a tariff will be levied. These are import taxes. We call them tariffs, but they're import taxes, right? So I'm paying a tax for that import. And when I don't know what it is, I have no way to plan in the future. Plus, I have no way to source that material from maybe a nation or a place where the import tax is lower, because it looks like they're constantly refiguring these things. In 90 days, we're going to have another group. Here is Elizabeth Warren on this issue.
To say, saying, well, I will continue to make those decisions and I'm going to hold off on these tariffs for 90 days. That doesn't put the economy in a better place. That doesn't put investors in a better place. Congress has a job right now, and that is to step up and take this authority away from Donald Trump. He has proven how he will use it, but remember, the statute that he's now using starts with a declaration of emergency. And in that same statute, Congress has the responsibility to decide, is it really an emergency or not? Are we really in an emergency with Belgium right now? Are we really in an emergency with South Korea? Congress can say, no, there's no emergency. It's a resolution. And if we do that, it takes Donald Trump back to the trade as we had it before. And tariffs are then decided with Congress having an important say in it. And that's an important signal to the rest of the world. Right now, it's a no curbs on Donald Trump, and that means chaos and corruption. We have an opportunity in Congress to vote that down and to say, no, we are going to use tariffs in a far more targeted way. We're sure not headed in the direction he wants to go. All of the Democrats are ready to support that. But we got to get the Republicans, or at least some of the Republicans, on board to make that happen. They've got to decide, is their job just to suck up to Donald Trump, or is their job to stand up for the American people?
JP, so that's the legislative angle on it, which is that all this power to levy these import tariffs, these import taxes, all that power was ceded to Donald Trump. And Congress never should have ceded that. The declaration of a national emergency, Donald Trump is declaring these emergencies so he has the power of the presidency to then do any number of things. In this case, it's tariffs. She's saying we need to take that back because that is essentially opening the door to this ridiculousness, which is all residing in Donald Trump, who doesn't really have a plan. He just knows, I wake up one day and I want 140% tariff on China and Vietnam. It's not even computed correctly. As you know, we've been over this and done it chapter and verse. But this herky-jerky total ineptitude is destroying the American economy and destroying world economies. So she's saying, take the power back, Congress.
Is that realistic, though? Do you see the GOP standing up and saying, no, Trump, we're going to handle this now?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I think that they've really ceded power, as I say, to this guy. And he's pretty well controlling things. I'm halting now because I'm thinking, how long will it take when you run the American economy completely off the road? Then you're going to see Congress step up because Trump will become politically more radioactive. But that's the politics of it. But here's the reality. once you ceded a bunch of power to him, it's tough to get it back. And I'd say be careful. It already may be something, as you say. I mean, could they take it back today? No, there just isn't the coalition on the GOP side. So we'll see. I mean, they've really thrown their lot in with Donald Trump, but he doesn't know what he is doing. I mean, he is just a guy at the switch, and, you know, he's flying a plane. He has no idea how to fly it. And it's scary. So, this is funny. Trevor Starr in Hollywood says, remember, Trump is 78 years old, but the 7 is silent. It is. They are the fits and starts of an adolescent. You know what I mean? Somebody who doesn't know anything, but just with the petulance, you know, and the anger, just says, I'm going to double your tariff. You know, I'm going to. And so essentially you've shut down trade with China, right? You really have. And the last thing I'll say about the China thing is China doesn't want to call Donald Trump, and China isn't going to call Donald Trump. There's this sense somehow everybody I know is coming to try to make a deal with the U.S., and that in itself is awful. She's right. It opens the door to corruption on a massive scale. It's basically that pay to play that I talk about on the show all the time. It's the self-enrichment. It's a patronage system. Right? I'll make an exception for you. I'll make an exception for you. I just made an exception for Apple. And there are carve-outs and exceptions for all of these different constituencies. Those constituencies that money the chief executive or give him an interest in another way, that whet his beak. And this is the new setup that I believe just leads to an unbridled corruption, further than we've even seen. What else do you have for me, Tony? Go ahead. Maybe I thought you had. Yeah, that's right.
Time.
Exactly.
So let's start with that news.
I'm going to let this run. Stop for a second, Tony. I'm going to let this run. But what I want you to hear, Lutnick is a cheerleader, and he's supposed to be the Secretary of Commerce. And he is a cheerleader without explanation, without plan, without a blueprint, without a perspective that makes any sense, nothing you can plan on. But listen to him repeat like some kind of refrain in the song he sings all the time about Donald Trump is great. It's going to be a great plan. We're all going to be dancing in your mansion. It's all going to work out so great. Go ahead, Tony. I won't interrupt again.
Let's start with that news late Friday, that this exemption on electronics, smartphones, laptop computers, and the like. What's the thinking? Why the exemption?
Well, if you remember, over the past couple of months, President Trump has called out pharmaceuticals and semiconductors and autos. He called them sector tariffs, and those are not available for negotiation. They are just going to be part of making sure we reshore the core national security items that need to be made in this country. We need to make medicine in this country. We learned it during COVID. We need to make it in this country. We need to make semiconductors, because if we don't own semiconductors here, remember, virtually all semiconductors are made now in Taiwan and they're finished in China. It's important that we reshore them. And so the president is going to come out with his policies on semiconductors and pharmaceuticals. They're going to be outside the reciprocal tariffs. And he was just making sure everyone understood that all of these products are outside the reciprocal tariffs, and they're going to have their own separate way of being considered.
But wait a minute. I'm asking you about the exemption, not about, I mean, the notice that went out Friday night saying that electronics, a wide range of electronics, including smartphones, including components used to make microchips, that these are now exempt from the reciprocal tariffs. Why that move?
I used to think that spring.
Yeah, we have to. Little interruption, but continued now. So this is Howard Lutnick on this week.
Remember, those products are going to be part of the semiconductor sectoral tariffs, which are coming. So you're going to see this week, there'll be a register in the Federal Registry. There'll be a notice put out. That is different types of work. So we're going to do that. We did that in autos. The president's going to do it for pharmaceuticals, and he's going to do it for semiconductors. So all those products are going to come under semiconductors, and they're going to have a special focused type of tariff to make sure that those products get reshored. We need to have semiconductors, we need to have chips, and we need to have flat panels. We need to have these things made in America. We can't be reliant on Southeast Asia for all of the things that operate for us. So what he's doing is he's saying they're exempt from the reciprocal tariffs, but they're included in the semiconductor tariffs, which are coming in probably a month or two. So these are coming soon. You shouldn't think this is really outside of it. Really think of it as being included in the semiconductor space, much like pharmaceuticals. These require special attention, and the president is on it.
So you're saying that the big tariffs on things like smartphones and laptops, iPhones, all those iPhones built in China, that those tariffs are temporarily off, but they're going to be coming right back on in another form in a month or so? Or what are you saying?
Correct. That's right. That's right. Semiconductors and pharmaceuticals will have a tariff model in order to encourage them to reshore, to be built in America. We need our medicines and we need semiconductors and our electronics to be built in America. We can't be beholden and rely upon foreign countries for fundamental things that we need. We can't be relying on China for fundamental things that we need. Our medicines and our semiconductors need to be built in America. Donald Trump is on it. He's calling that out. So you should understand these are included in the semiconductor tariffs that are coming, and the pharmaceuticals are coming. Those two areas are coming in the next month or two. So this is not like a permanent sort of exemption. He's just clarifying that these are not available to be negotiated away by countries. These are things that are national security that we need to be made in America.
Okay, so let me just say this. If you didn't understand that, there's a reason, because he doesn't know what he's talking about. He literally is just making it up. He's flying truly by the seat of his pants on this, because he's basically saying, oh, the president made these exceptions because he wants to let everybody know that those aren't negotiable, but they, in another 90 days, we're going to have another set. We have the pharmaceuticals, we have the semiconductors. There is no coherence here. Even if you take what this guy just says, and as I say, he is just the great American BS machine. It is, somebody said in the chat, blah, 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 BS. Uncle Russ, thank you very much. That's what that was. The administration, if you take what that guy just said, Lutnick, so you're telling me then you're going to tariff semiconductors, you're going to tariff chips coming into this country, you're going to tariff the component parts of these things that are used here and then assembled to make a product that is purchased by Americans. Why then am I incentivized as the entity putting these component parts together to keep my factory in this country? Why don't I move it offshore? That way I can get my component parts from all of these different places and it won't be tariffed. If I keep my factory, which puts together all of these component parts in this country, all the component parts are now insanely expensive, and my product no one's going to buy because it's going to be too expensive. So I should offshore it where I can get all those component parts cheaper. That's just one thing that is crazy about what this guy's just said. His entire dance is BS. And all of them are speaking BS because they're covering their butts for a guy who doesn't know what he's going to do hour to hour and is completely motivated by this world of, frankly, corruption and ingratiation, where people just come to essentially kiss the ring. It's got to be a great feeling. Phones ringing off the hook. But as we told you the other day, it took 2 years to make the trade deal with Canada and Mexico. Now you've got the phone ringing off the hook. You've got 50 to 90, even more trade deals to make. You don't have that kind of time, or you got to be on the golf course. So I don't know what the plan is here. There is no end game that makes sense, and these guys know it. And the last thing I'll say on this, before I got one other video, the last thing I'll say is Europe and many of the powerful countries around the world, they're not down with the ingratiation game. They're not down with begging for some kind of American policy that favors them. They may do it in the short term, but that's not a long-term plan. Plain and simple. The Economist did a great article on just this thing I'm talking about. Europe and other countries around the world are making other trade plans. America is going to be cut out of it. This isolationism is a bad idea. It's easy to take a chance on the economy. Oh, I missed the last part. When it won't affect you. Ludnick and company. Thank you. These are billionaires. When you hear Ludnick speak, I don't know how he got to be a billionaire. I really don't. But he is, and it's the Billionaires Boys Club that runs the Trump administration. Now to CNN and polling, which shows that the American public is beginning to turn in some big ways on this Donald Trump policy. Then we'll move on. Take a look.
So, obviously, you had Joe Biden before you had Donald Trump. And of course, Donald Trump would say, you know, Joe Biden left us in a horrible state and I have to help dig us out of it. All right. So let's take a look here. More responsible for the state of the economy or the economic state. In March, CBS News asked about inflation, and 38% said it was Joe Biden who was more responsible, compared to 34% who said Donald Trump. Let's jump forward to now, in the month of April. Look at this number. 54% of Americans say that Donald Trump is more to blame for the state of the economy than Joe Biden. Joe Biden's number has fallen from 38% to 21%. Donald Trump may try to blame Joe Biden for this, and maybe that was working a month ago in the month of March. But since the tariff war has begun, it's not working anymore. Americans are not buying what Donald Trump is selling them. They believe, the clear majority, 54%, that Donald Trump is more to blame for the state of the economy at this point than Joe Biden is, Jessica.
That is interesting to see how that evolves just in the last month, really.
Yeah.
How are they viewing tariffs?
Yeah. Okay. So obviously the big thing when it comes to the state of the economy right now for Donald Trump is tariffs. So let's take a look here. All right. The tariff plan, new tariffs on importing goods, oppose versus favor. You go back to January. Look at this. 48% said they favored these new tariffs, these Donald Trump tariffs, compared to 46% who opposed. Look at where we are now in the CBS News YouGov poll. A switcheroo, Jessica, a switcheroo. The clear majority, 58% of Americans oppose these new tariffs compared to just 42% who favor them. Again, this is part of the picture that we've seen throughout this presentation, right, Jessica? More and more people are turning against Donald Trump. Their views of the economy are getting worse. They are holding Donald Trump responsible. And when it comes to his signature issue, so far in his second term, tariffs, I mean, my goodness gracious, that trend line is ridiculously awful for Trump. The opposition number from 46 to 58 and the favor from 48 to 42. Americans have switched on a dime on the economy, on Donald Trump, in large part because of the tariffs, which they increasingly do not like.
Thank you very much for that, Tony. So I think that the tide is turning. I mean, he really, I don't know that guy on CNN, but he really sells it. I think it will get even worse as you begin to see really the inflationary spiral will be pronounced. But I want to go back to Howard Lutnick and what he was saying about, we want to get semiconductors and chips manufactured and done here in this country. We don't want to be dependent on the supply chain the way we were in COVID. That he might have said that so many times that you began to figure, wow, they must rehearse this or must be a talking point. And it is laudable. I mean, he said it over and over because he knows it lands well, because it makes sense, right? The idea somehow that we should produce semiconductors in this country, that there should be manufacturing and research done in this country, and we shouldn't be beholden and dependent on China or any other nation to provide these things that we might need in the case of an emergency, and pharmaceuticals fall into the same category, and we saw it in the supply chain. The only problem with that is what? We had that. We had the CHIPS Act under Biden. That was designed to do just what Lutnick was talking about, to onshore. And it was done with federal money. What was it, $280 billion, boosting U.S. semiconductor manufacturing, research, and workforce development. Those are the primary goals of the CHIPS and Science Act, to reduce the nation's reliance on foreign-made chips, strengthen global supply chains, and revitalize American semiconductor production. It's right there. Trump undid it because it's Biden. The same way he undid the Iran nuclear deal because it was Obama. The reality is we were on track to do those things that Lutnick is talking about. We were also on track with a really good economy, best in the developed world. That all seems like ancient history because it's changed just in the last 2 months. He made exemptions on all these electronics because Apple and others got to him, but screw the rest of us, says Carol Perkins. I think he's all over the place, which is why you just don't know what's going to happen next. But I do think there is increasing pushback from his own party. There'll be increasing pushback from the U.S. electorate. And on some level, that will affect his own party as well. So all of that's still to come. I mean, I think those developments will happen over the next few months. The last thing, and it's been kind of advertised, this is Ray Dalio, the hedge fund investor who is famous for some pretty bold predictions. I have a few of his books around this house somewhere. And here he was, I forget exactly where he was talking, might have been, not important. Anyway, this is Dalio on Meet the Press, I think it was, on his sense of the future. So this just was yesterday.
I'm talking about a recession. Do you think it is likely that the United States will dip into a recession?
He's super
because
careful,
of
you'll
President
hear him.
Trump's
I think that right now we are at a decision-making point and very close to a recession. And I'm worried about something worse than a recession if this isn't handled well. A recession is 2 negative quarters of GDP, and whether it goes slightly there, we always have those things. We have something that's much more profound. We have a breaking down of the monetary order. We are going to change the monetary order because we cannot spend the amounts of money, so we have that problem. And when we talk about the dollar and we talk about tariffs, we have that. We are having profound changes in our domestic order, how ruling is existing, and we're having profound changes in the world order. Such times are very much like the 1930s. I've studied history, and this repeats over and over again. So if you take tariffs, if you take debt, if you take the rising power challenging the existing power, if you take those factors and look at the factors, those changes in the orders, the systems, are very, very disruptive. How that's handled could produce something that is much worse than a recession, or it could be handled well. Let's take the debt situation.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, very quickly, because I want to be very specific about what you mean. You're saying worse than recession. You're saying this is reminiscent of the 1930s. We should tell our viewers you correctly predicted the 2008 financial crisis. What is your prediction for where the country is headed right now?
Right now, we're at a juncture. Let's take the budget. If the budget deficit can be reduced to 3% of GDP, it will be about 7% if things are not changed. If it could be reduced to about 3% of GDP, and these trade deficits and so on are managed in the right way, this could all be managed very well. I believe that members of Congress should take the pledge, what I call the 3% pledge, that in one way or another, that they will get that budget deficit down to that number. If they don't, we're going to have a supply-demand problem for debt at the same time as we have these other problems. And the results of that will be worse than a normal recession.
So, and just to follow up on that point, worse than a recession, you're talking about the 1930s. What specifically are you warning of? Are you saying that it could be as bad as a depression? What's your biggest fear?
The value of money. What is a storehold of wealth? That is a bond. In other words, one man's debt is another man's assets, bondholders. And so we're going to be in a situation where if that storehold of wealth is in jeopardy because there's too much supply and demand and so on, and we have a monetary inflation, we will have great disruptions. And that could be like the breakdown of the monetary system in 71. It could be like 2008. It's going to be very severe. I think it could be more severe than those if these other matters simultaneously occur. Imagine if we have a downturn politically and an international conflict.
What's worst case scenario that you're warning of? To be very specific, to put it into terms people can understand.
Specific, the value of money, internal conflict that is not the normal democracy as we know it, and international conflict in a way that is highly disruptive to the world economy and could even be a military conflict, just as these breakdowns have occurred before. You know, we have a new order that began in 1945, a new monetary order and a new geopolitical order. And these go in cycles that can be measured. And I worry about the breakdown of that kind of an order, particularly since it doesn't need to happen, because there are certain things that could be done in which this is better, a better restructuring of these debts and actions taken.
So that takes me to my next question. You have this book, How Countries Go Broke.
Yeah, I'm going to stop it there. I mean, it's getting a little bit in the weeds, but you get the general sense. He's being very careful about what he says. For Dalio, a lot of his stuff is informed by the debt, and it's important. I think he touched on something that is huge. You know, I mentioned this to you last week. It's really the thing that got Trump to, pause those tariffs. It was the bond market. It's the Treasury bond market, which has always been in America, in the world. American bonds, Treasury bills, are gold. They are the safest haven in a violent, changing, unpredictable world. Our T-bonds are the thing that everybody rushes to. That's why so much of our debt is all over the world, because this is viewed as a stable economy in general, a stable political system in general, and as a place to put money where it will be safe. It's always viewed, those Treasury bills, they become a place where you can park big amounts of money and not have to worry. The government of America isn't going to default. The government of America isn't going anywhere. And as I say, there's a solidity to everything. Well, now you don't have that. You had panic in the markets last week around that, around the bond market. And that's what's happening in increasing ways to undercut the faith that the world has in America. It was front page of the New York Times today. Trump, here you go. Trump tariffs shake faith in the safety of U.S. bonds. I still get the paper, I know. But it's a real thing. And so when you talk about your debt and essentially writing checks that you can't cover, you need to lay that debt off. And there may be increasing challenges in finding entities, countries that will take that U.S. debt. So all of these things are working. That's what Dalio was saying in the midst of everything else he was saying. There's going to be a crisis of confidence in the bond markets. And you may not be able to lay that debt off. And meantime, you're just running up more and more debt like it's business as usual. And you cannot do that. Anyway, newspaper, what's that? Exactly. Thank you. All right. I wanted to get to Bill Maher. So should we pivot to that, Kim? I feel like that's something I should do. Yeah. All right. So before I do, I want to thank you all for being here. Our live show, which is taken in on delay by most of you, but we so appreciate you being here. Surf and Tumbleweed with a $5.20 super chat. The Edge of Space Chicks got upstaged by the Julian 5.2
earthquake. Yeah.
Earthquake. That's right. There was an earthquake in San Diego this morning. We mentioned it. Did we mention it on the air? I maybe mentioned it off the air. I don't know if we mentioned it.
I know we were talking about it before we started.
Yeah, before we started. Sorry if we didn't. If we neglected to mention it. Yep. I think there was some shaking, but I don't think there was any destruction. Right? That I saw.
I think a lot of people felt that one. It was kind of big.
Hey, 5.2 is getting serious.
Yeah.
Yeah, my friend who lives in Chula Vista said, yeah, he heard like it was his at his print shop. So he thought someone drove into his door. He thought someone drove into. He's like, what the hell? He's like, oh, it was an earthquake. Because at first he thought, like I said, it sounded like someone drove into his metal door.
They've had some aftershocks as well. One of them a 3.9, and they say there are reports of minor damage, but no reports of injury.
Wow. Yeah. What a scary time. Boy, that really reminds you, in the middle of everything else. It's a Mother Nature. grinds
Everything happens
on.
in threes. We're gonna get one more, right?
Oh my God!
Tony.
I hope. Thank you for the encouraging word, Tony. Really. I was going to play for you. Oh, by the way, let me just shout out to Coachella Valley Coffee. I mean, Coachella is the scene of the Bernie Sanders attended rally, but I did want to mention that I love my Coachella Valley and love my Coachella Valley coffee. And there's a glass or cup of the stuff you like. The tea, the coffee, all organic from women-owned farms. Check them out at CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. It is the best coffee on earth. Their tea is sine qua non. Top of the game.
Ding.
And they have spices as well. Yeah, that would be dingable. I can't encourage you enough to take advantage of our discount when you order from Coachella Valley Coffee, CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Load up your cart and use MarkT at checkout in the discount code, and you will benefit from the 10% discount. Amy B says, I'm in Coachella Valley right now.
What?
That is crazy.
What? You need to send us a picture from the coffee shop.
Oh, yeah, you should. If you do go by there, Cliff is there. You'll have to get in touch with him. You could call him or something, maybe. My coffee and tea order coming today, says Becky E. Love that. Buy now before the tariffs kick in, says John Watson. Yes, there I am with Cliff. And Cliff is the coolest guy. And he's just like one of those guys, like, you know, they're so grateful for this, so grateful for those people who have a lot of grace about them. That's who he is. So
how did they get you out of that place? I'm sure you never wanted to leave. The minute you walked in and smelled the coffee,
oh my God, it smells like
they have to
heaven.
Pry
Smells
you
like
out of
heaven.
there.
Wow. Now they hand roast all the coffee, everyone.
Yeah.
This is a boutique roastery. Like, you know, you can find cheaper beans definitely on the internet, but that's not fresh crop, and it's not all hand roasted the way that this is a boutique roastery. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. There is the crew there. And it's so much fun to watch everybody down there. And when I see them in person, it's like, hey, I recognize you from social media. It's very fun. So anyway, CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Again, use MarkT at checkout for 10% off. And drink up and enjoy.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Well, Bill Maher went to the White House and was astounded that Donald Trump was nice. Yeah, Bill Maher really was taken in by Donald Trump. He was expecting, I guess, some kind of monstrous guy. But Bill Maher found not a monstrous guy, but a nice guy. Bill Maher says that he laughed at himself a bit, that he seemed totally engaged. It was, I want to run some of what he said about it, but if I do, I'll be demonetized, so I can't. So all I will say is that, what did you expect, Bill Maher? You're a guest in the White House. You expected him to dress you down?
I mean, does it matter how nice the guy is in person if he then turns around and says he wants to deport American citizens? Like, what?
Yeah, of course. You're exactly right.
That's not very nice, Mark.
What's interesting to me about this is that he dumped on Geraldo Rivera, who made the point that Donald Trump is a nice guy in person, when Rivera was making this point on the air with Maher. And Maher, this is a few years ago, and Maher said, I don't care if he's a nice guy. He's destroying the world, or whatever he said, something to that effect. And now Bill Maher goes to the White House, and now he's the one saying, wow, he's a nice guy. And the rest of us are saying, I don't care if he's a nice guy in person. Of course he's a nice guy in person. He's hosting you for dinner.
And not always. He's a nice guy to Bill Maher because Bill Maher is an old white guy. He's not nice to people who are disabled. He's not necessarily nice to women. He's not necessarily nice to people who he believes are or perceives are beneath him in some way. He's nice to Bill Maher because Bill Maher's a celebrity and he's a white guy and he showed up at the White House. That's all.
Now, Maher, I thought, would have a sense of self-awareness, maybe be the way to term it, that would allow for the fact that, two things can be true. One is that he's ingratiating and charming in a one-on-one situation or in a dinner situation or a hosting situation. I mean, he is a performer. He really is. Everything about Trump is very performative. And he's a TV star. While also being this guy who cooks up these horrible policies that are, as you suggested, Kim, unconstitutional, illegal, loathsome, and grotesque. Not to mention completely ill-informed. So this guy's worldview hasn't changed. He's just had an interaction with Bill Maher over a couple of hours.
I love what Joy Fox says. Olbermann said Maher said the same thing back in 2016 when he met Trump. Then he was mad because he felt betrayed by his actions in his first term. Whatever.
Yeah,
How
I mean, I
many
think
times do you have to go through it,
Maher has kind of lost the plot, and you could say he was gaslit by Trump. I just want to. I really liked him. He later added, "Why can't we get the guy I met to be the public guy?" Well, it's not a question of even the public guy. It's public policy. Why can't public policy reflect the grace and apparently, as you say, sort of the well-mannered, even-balanced attitude that you saw at dinner? Why can't we get public policy like that? We get extreme, prejudicial policy that is also outrageous, unprecedented, and insanely destructive. Kid Rock set the meeting up. Also, Dana White was there, the UFC CEO. And Trump supposedly is still going to be held to account by Bill Maher, but I'm looking at I'll just read it. He also made fun of himself because Maher had made fun of him along the way, Trump. And so he says, I'm not the leader of anything. This is from Maher's actual show. I'm not the leader of anything, Maher said, except maybe a contingent of centrist-minded people who think there's got to be a better way of running this country than hating each other every minute. Maher says a lot of that stuff. That's kind of the both sidesism that Trump really counts on and that Maher really delivers every week. Okay, so meet up in person. Maybe it'll be different. Spoiler alert, it was, he says. First good sign, before I left for the Capitol, I had my staff collect and print out this list of almost 60 different insulting epithets that the president said about me. Things like stupid dummy, lowlife dummy, sleazebag, sick, sad, stone cold crazy, really a dumb guy, fired like a dog, his show is dead. I brought this to the White House because I wanted him to sign it, which he did with good humor, Maher says. And I know as I say that, millions of liberal sphincters just tightened. Oh my God, Bill, are you going to say something nice about him? What I'm going to do is report exactly, Maher says, what happened. You decide what you think about it. If that's not enough pure Trump hate for you, I don't give up, right? So no, I didn't go MAGA, he says, and to the president's credit, there was no pressure to. After we left the Oval Office, he showed me the little room off the office, where the Clinton used to, the room. That's where they keep the merch now, he says. He gave me a bunch of hats, but he didn't ask me to take pictures in one, which I appreciated. The guy I met, Maher says, is not the person who the night before the dinner tweeted a bunch of nasty crap about how he thought this dinner was a bad idea and what a deranged expletive I was. I read it and thought, oh, what a lovely way to welcome someone to your home. But when I got there, that guy wasn't living there. Now, does Trump want respect? Of course. Who doesn't? My friend said to me, what are you going to wear to the White House? I said, I don't know, but I'm not going to dress like Zelensky. I'll tell you that. Just for starters, he laughs. I've never seen him laugh in public before, Maher says, but he does, including at himself. And it's not fake. And he goes on. I mean, again, different examples of Trump being kind of a roll with it guy when it came to the interaction, and also the idea somehow that Trump was open to a conversation. I said to him at one point, Maher says, Mr. President, you know, the dog, that's unusual in the White House. He said, well, you don't have a dog. Well, a lot of presidents, he said, they had a dog for political reasons. I said, no, people love dogs. That's why that is. This is Maher speaking. And then Trump said, oh, yeah, okay, that's true. I'm telling you, he said, it happened. In other words, over the conversation about this dog, why don't you have a dog? Trump says many people have a dog for political reasons. And Maher, plays back at him, no, people love dogs. That's why people have dogs in the White House. And Trump says, oh, yeah, I guess you're right. So on the strength of that, I'm supposed to change. Oh, yeah. Oh, so he can be persuaded of things, is what you're saying, on that whole dog thing. So whenever we have a dog conversation, we know that he is persuadable on it. Great. At one point, we were walking through his amazing, and it is an amazing tour of the whole house, Bill Maher says. And I don't remember exactly what we were talking about, but it must have been something with the 2020 election, because I know he used the word lost. And I distinctly remember saying, wow, I never thought I'd hear you say that. He didn't get mad. He's much more self-aware than he lets on in public. Look, I get it, Maher says. It doesn't matter who he is at a private dinner with a comedian. It matters who he is on the world stage. I'm just taking it as a positive that this person exists, because everything I've ever not liked about him, I swear to God, at least absent, at least on this night with this guy. In other words, everything he's not liked about him was absent that night with the guy he met with. Kid Rock told me the night before, if you want to get a word in edgewise, you're going to have to cut him off or he'll just go on. Not at all, Maher says. I've had so many conversations with prominent people who are much less connected, people who don't look you in the eye, people who don't really listen because they just want you to get to the next thing. And then he goes on. So, again, I'd suggest the litmus test for someone's sanity, someone's how deserving someone is of your respect. He's a legislator. He's the top legislator in the land. He's the president of the United States, the most powerful nation on earth. I, in a way, don't care how he was at dinner. Now, you can say, Mark, you're so biased. Of course you would say that. Yeah, I am. I'm biased based on policies. I'm biased based on law. I'm biased based on what we're going to have to live with in an America that will have a series of withering consequences as the result of judgments that Donald Trump has made. So yeah, in a way, I don't care. Oh my God, he offered to cut my steak. I don't care. Okay, so a nice guy is destroying America and trying to be a king. What's the point? Does that make it better? Exactly. Inlays said that. I think Maher is smart. I think Maher is funny. I watch Maher's show. I disagree with Maher about a lot of stuff. And I think what Maher is doing is he's edging closer to Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, the other side, the Ben Shapiros of the world, people within the right-wing ecosphere that can, in a way, sorry to say this, Bill, but I feel like as you embrace them, they can help you. You get more right-wing tune-in. You're seen as the kind of, hey, he's the guy who understands us. I agree that you need to reach across on some level, continue with conversations. I'm traveling later this month, and I'm going to be staying with somebody who's MAGA in one case. I'm going to be, I don't know if they're MAGA, but that general, they lean that way.
That'll be fun.
We have MAGA in my family. I mean, it happens there. So I think you can't, flip them all the bird. You have to deal with them. I do believe that there is a fringe group there in that MAGA world that as the nation starts to take on water, they're not going to blame Biden anymore. So I do think that some of them will come over, but the diehards, they'll always blame the libs. I don't wonder why the emperor doesn't have a dog. A cat wouldn't like him, let alone a dog, Lady Peterson. I see. So you feel it's that the animal would have no taste for Donald Trump. Anyway, the bottom line on the Maher thing is, I think Maher was in a sense gaslit. He was in a sense just completely taken in. I'm really surprised. You know, I'm surprised that he was such a pushover. I mean, these people are all pushovers. Celebrities are big pushovers. People who need the spotlight. Maher, Trump among them. They want to be liked. And I think at the end of this, and I'm not suggesting that, and maybe I'm misreading, to be fair to Maher, maybe I'm misreading this, like in some way. Maybe he's saying what I'm saying, which is, hey, I had a good dinner and all I did was relate how nice the guy was at dinner. I'm not saying that I endorse his policies. I'm just saying we have to listen to him because he's a real guy. But I would say that's completely extraneous. That information doesn't do anything but soften the image of Trump. So you may tell me, I'm just relating, you know, how good he was on the tennis court and how great a host he was at dinner and how we all hung out and laughed about things. And yeah, but you're softening the image, which distracts from the horror show which is going on in that Oval Office you sat in. I think it's very dangerous to do that. So, Bill DeBono says, in 2018, Maher had a monologue describing what a con Trump is. I can't believe how easily Maher has been fooled. He's become completely tone deaf. Thank you. Billy DeBono, $5 super chat is exactly right. I really think the same thing that he made fun of Geraldo Rivera for saying some years ago. He's now guilty of doing the exact same thing. It's unacceptable. It really is. And Maher deserves the blowback that he's getting for doing it. So.
The Mark Thompson Show.
The Trump had a dog, Calvin Wong says, but Noam shot it.
Oh, no.
That is funny and dark, and I love both those things. Anyway, that is, by the way, seeing that gaggle of people in the Oval Office around that meeting today with the president of El Salvador, that was incredible. It was like the sycophant convention all came, to one room. And I just thought, in fact, let me just kind of close. We have Kim's news, but I've got to take my dying cat to the hospital, which is the saddest thing.
Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, really hard. So when I'm speaking of sycophants, though, there was a parade of sycophants, and a supercut was done on it. Tony, do you still have it? It was a CNN supercut of all of the different people, I believe, doing their thing, doing the dance that they all have to do. And here's a look at it.
Ms. Cabinet.
Okay.
Under your leadership, we are going to revitalize and make shipbuilding and maritime great again.
At the Trump EPA, we're going to make it proud.
The honor and respect we have for each other is a reflection of you and your leadership.
Thanks to your leadership.
You were overwhelmingly elected by the biggest majority.
Well, Mr. President, thank you for your leadership at the border.
Thanks to your fantastic leadership.
So the American worker is grateful. Main Street is grateful for you.
Yeah. He truly does like to drink that in. So, truly loves to break that. I see something in caps. We don't like caps in the chat if you can avoid it in the future. Oh my God, this is like the movie The Dictator, says Peter. Yeah. Anyway, no, it's not Charlie. It's the actual younger cat, Richard. It's Moki, my little Moki, who's such a sweetheart. And there's been some other loss. I'm sorry, True Tech. Yeah, it's a very difficult day for us here. So that is that's the nature of the White House. That's the nature of the government right now. It's run by one guy, and now he is pushing back on the Supreme Court. We'll see what David K. Johnston has to say about that tomorrow. J.L. Coven is going to join you tomorrow, Kim.
What?
Yeah, he's a brilliant lawyer. J.L. Coven, also the guy who has done a Trump impression. He does a Musk impression that's really good. And I would say, but listen to his takes on things when he's not doing any impressions at all. He does great stuff on his podcast, which he does a podcast where it's just him talking about stuff that we talk about. And then he does on his YouTube channel videos on different things. I'd really encourage you to check him out tomorrow because I think it's going to be, he's got some really, really clean takes on things. So I'm hopeful that you and he vibe together. I'll be here at the beginning of the show tomorrow because I wouldn't want to miss the finale of Mark's Madness, and I just want to check on it again.
Mark's Madness.
Tony, where are we on the voting? This is the finals. AOC Baby Girl leads I Blame You. Again, you're voting for one of these two drops to win.
I blame you.
Or
oh, girl, baby girl, don't even play.
Again, either
I blame you
or AOC.
Oh, girl, baby girl, don't even play.
Voting till midnight tonight Pacific, 3 a.m. on the East Coast. Good luck. I am.
AOC is in the lead there.
AOC right now. The voting is really early. Look, how much time do we have? We've got another almost 12 hours to go.
Mm-hmm.
So, is there a battle for last place? Oh, is there a bottle for last place?
There should be.
There's a bottle of Tenuta Vineyard wine for the first place finisher. I think
are you sending yourself wine if you take the whole thing?
I'm so blown away. I did it so quickly. Which is the way to do it. Don't overthink it. You know what I mean? But it would be extraordinary. Anyway. All right. Kim, sadly, I've got to go to the hospital with my little one, so I cannot linger, but I do thank everybody who sent in super stickers like Eugenio de Arnal. Come on, with a $5 super sticker. Thank you, Eugenio. R.I.P. Jed the Fish Gould, the iconic K-Rock DJ for 35 years, friend of Gene Bean Baxter. He passed away. Thank you, Luis, for telling us that, and thank you for $5 super chat. I didn't know that. That's sad. That is kind of the the passing of a generation. Usually I would consider what RFK is suggesting, but it's RFK Jr., and he has no dental or medical background, so I'm going to disagree. All right, that's fair enough. Lady Beatrice with a $5 super chat. A $5 super chat from Daniel. Can we add intelligence to the water?
I'll take that. That's an additive I can get behind.
I love it. Did anyone ever ask Trump who is the we Kimosabe when Trump says we're going to be?
Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show.
When Trump says we're going to do well, who's the we? When you say we're going to do well.
Out of time. Bye-bye.
We are out of time. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Tony. Till tomorrow. Bye-bye.